Have you ever started something with real excitement, only to feel your motivation slowly disappear when progress became difficult? Most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because the road becomes longer than they expected. And when results don't show up quickly, discouragement quietly convinces them that success simply isn't meant for them. But here's the strange truth no one talks about. The people who eventually change their lives aren't always the smartest, the luckiest, or the most talented. Very often, they are simply the ones who refused to quit when everyone else quietly walked away. In this story, you'll meet a man whose life looked completely stuck. Debt, repeated failures, lost confidence. The kind of situation where many people eventually give up. And honestly, he almost did. But one small decision changed everything. Not a miracle, not sudden success, just a quiet shift in the way he approached struggle. A decision that slowly transformed his habits, his mindset, and eventually his entire life. By the end of this story, you may see persistence in a completely different way. And more importantly, you might realize that the same hidden power exists in your own life right now. So stay with me, because the lesson behind this man's journey might be exactly what someone needs to hear today. Most people begin their goals with a spark in their chest. A new plan, a fresh morning, a quiet promise to finally change something in their lives. For a while, the energy feels unstoppable, like the first steps of a long-awaited journey. But then, progress slows down, and reality begins to push back. And suddenly, that bright excitement starts to flicker. At first, the obstacles seem small. A difficult day at work, a missed routine, a problem no one expected. Nothing dramatic, just enough friction to make the path feel heavier than it looked at the beginning. Still, the mind starts whispering those dangerous little doubts. Maybe this is harder than I thought. Days pass, and the early motivation begins to fade. The results people hoped for don't show up as quickly as they imagined. Effort goes in, yet the world seems strangely quiet in response. No applause, no clear progress, just more work waiting tomorrow. And that silence, well, it can shake even the strongest determination. Some people push a little longer. They wake up early, try again, give one more honest effort. But when struggle repeats itself over and over, something inside them begins to bend. Discouragement sneaks in slowly, like a shadow stretching across the room. Before they realize it, the excitement that once fueled them starts to feel distant. That's when the dangerous comparison begins. They look around and see others who appear to move forward faster. Success stories seem effortless from the outside. Meanwhile, their own journey feels messy, slow, and painfully uncertain. And the question forms quietly in the back of their mind. Is this struggle even worth it? For many people, that question becomes the turning point. Not because they lack talent, intelligence, or courage, but because slow progress can make any dream feel fragile. When effort stretches longer than expected, the road starts looking endless. And the human heart isn't always patient with long roads. So gradually, many people begin to step back. They tell themselves they'll try again someday. Maybe when life feels easier, or when conditions improve. But deep down, something else is happening in that moment. The dream begins slipping quietly out of their hands. Yet somewhere out there, someone faces this same moment differently. A man who has already stumbled more times than he can count. A man whose life has tested him in ways most people never see. And strangely enough, his story doesn't begin with success. It begins with the weight of failure pressing heavily on his shoulders. But that part of the story hasn't started yet. Somewhere in a quiet corner of the world lived a man who once believed life would unfold differently. Years earlier, he had dreams like anyone else. Simple ones, honest ones. A stable life, a sense of pride, maybe even the feeling that his efforts truly mattered. But life, as it often does, had other plans waiting for him. And little by little, those plans began to collapse. At first, the setbacks came one at a time. A business idea that didn't work, a job opportunity that slipped away at the last minute, bills that arrived faster than the money needed to pay them. Each problem felt manageable on its own, but together they began forming a heavy storm. Soon, the financial pressure started tightening around his life. He worked long hours, yet it always seemed like he was barely staying afloat. The harder he tried to fix things, the more complicated everything became. Friends moved forward with their lives while he remained stuck in the same place. And that quiet comparison slowly chipped away at his confidence. The failures weren't just external anymore. They started echoing inside his mind. Every time he tried something new, An old memory of defeat followed him. It whispered reminders of what had gone wrong before. Eventually, those whispers became louder than his own hopes. Even simple decisions began to feel heavier. Should he risk trying again, or protect himself from another disappointment? The safe choice always seemed easier in the moment. After all, when you've been knocked down enough times, caution feels like survival. And survival became his daily routine. From the outside, his life looked ordinary. He woke up early, worked hard, handled responsibilities like anyone else. But inside, something had changed. The confident man he once imagined becoming now felt like a distant version of himself, almost like someone he used to know. Sometimes late at night he would sit quietly and think about it all. The chances he missed, the risks that didn't work out, the years that seemed to slip past him. A quiet question would rise in those moments. Not loud, not dramatic, just painfully honest. Do I still have the strength to try again? Because deep down he wasn't just tired of failing. He was tired of believing and being wrong. And that kind of exhaustion doesn't show on the outside. It settles quietly in a person's spirit, waiting for the moment when the next challenge finally arrives. And that moment was coming sooner than he expected. A challenge that would test him more than anything before. A moment where the weight of his past failures would return all at once. The kind of moment that forces a person to face the truth about themselves. And what happened next would push him into a place he never thought he'd reach. For a long time, his life began to feel like a circle he couldn't escape. Every new attempt carried the weight of every failure that came before it. He would start something with cautious hope, take a few determined steps forward, and somehow, sooner or later, everything would collapse again. It felt less like progress and more like reliving the same story. Each setback left a small mark on his confidence. Not enough to break him all at once, but enough to slowly wear him down. The mind has a strange habit of collecting evidence from the past. After enough disappointments, it begins to expect the next one. And expectation can quietly shape reality. So even when new opportunities appeared, he hesitated. His thoughts moved slower than they once did. Instead of imagining what could go right, he saw all the ways things might fall apart. The memory of previous failures stood like silent warnings in his mind, and caution slowly replaced courage. His daily routine became predictable in a way that felt heavy. Wake up, work, deal with problems, go home exhausted. There was effort in his life, plenty of it. But effort without visible progress can feel like pushing against a locked door. And after a while, even strong people begin to question the point of pushing. Sometimes he would watch others moving forward in life. Promotions, new opportunities, visible success. From the outside, it seemed like they had discovered some hidden path he couldn't see. Meanwhile, he felt like he was walking through thick fog, never sure where the road actually led. And that uncertainty slowly drained his energy. What made it harder was the quiet loneliness of the struggle. People around him saw the surface of his life. They saw a man working, surviving, handling responsibilities. But they didn't see the internal battle he fought every single day. The battle between hope and resignation. Some days he tried to push harder. He would set new goals, force himself to take action, try to rebuild momentum. But when those efforts stumbled again, the disappointment hit even deeper. Because each attempt carried a little more emotional risk, and each failure made the next attempt feel heavier. That's the strange trap many people fall into. The more they try and fail, the more impossible success begins to look. Eventually, the mind starts building invisible walls around possibility. Not because the future is truly closed, but because the past feels too loud to ignore. And then, one day, something happened that pushed him further than ever before. A moment so difficult it forced him to face a painful decision. A moment where the exhaustion of trying collided with the fear of giving up. And standing in that moment, he realized he was closer to quitting than he had ever been. What happened next would change everything. There comes a moment in many lives when everything feels too heavy to carry. For this man, that moment arrived quietly, without warning. Another plan had failed. Another opportunity slipped through his hands. The effort he had poured into it seemed to vanish like smoke in the wind. And for the first time, the thought of quitting didn't feel distant anymore. That evening, he sat alone in the small room where he often tried to think things through. The air felt still, almost as if the world itself had paused. Bills were scattered across the table, reminders of pressures that never seemed to leave. His mind replayed every attempt, every mistake, every door that had closed on him, and exhaustion settled over him like a heavy blanket. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. Not searching for answers this time, just trying to quiet the storm in his mind. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't loud or dramatic. Sometimes they're silent moments where a person wonders if continuing even makes sense. And in that moment, he was dangerously close to letting go. The thought crept in slowly. What if I just stopped trying? No more risks, no more disappointments, no more constant struggle. Life would become simpler, safer, quieter. But something about that idea felt deeply unsettling, because beneath the exhaustion, another truth lingered. Quitting wouldn't just end the struggle. It would also close the door to the life he once believed was possible. Every dream he had carried, every future he once imagined, they would quietly disappear with that decision. He imagined years passing in that quiet resignation, working just to survive, avoiding risks, never testing his limits again. On the surface, it might look like peace, but deep inside, he knew something would slowly eat at him. The painful question of what might have been. That realization sat with him in the silence. Failure hurt, yes, but regret had a different kind of weight. Failure meant he had tried and fallen short. Regret meant he had stopped before the story had a chance to change. And somehow, regret felt far heavier. So he sat there for a long time, thinking about the road behind him. All the struggles, all the effort, all the times he had gotten back up. Maybe those years weren't just a record of failure after all. Maybe they were something else entirely. Something he hadn't understood yet. Because that night, right there in that quiet room, a small shift began inside him. Not a sudden miracle, not a burst of motivation, just a simple, stubborn realization forming slowly in his mind. And that realization would soon lead him to make a decision he had never made before. That night didn't end with a burst of motivation. There was no dramatic speech, no sudden surge of confidence. Instead, something quieter happened inside him. A thought settled into his mind with surprising clarity, and strangely enough, it felt stronger than any excitement he had felt before. He realized that most of his pain came from measuring success too quickly. Every time results didn't appear fast enough, he saw it as proof of failure. Every setback felt like a final judgment on his ability. But what if that way of thinking was the real trap? What if the problem wasn't the struggle itself? He began to see something he had never fully considered. Progress in life rarely moves in straight lines. Sometimes effort works quietly in the background, long before results appear. Just like seeds growing underground before breaking through the soil. And maybe he had been digging them up too early. So instead of asking, "Am I succeeding yet?" he asked himself a different question. "Am I still moving forward today?" It was a small shift in perspective, but it changed the way the road looked. Suddenly, the journey felt less like a test and more like a process. He made a quiet decision in that moment. From now on, he wouldn't judge himself by outcomes alone. Instead, he would measure something far more powerful: his refusal to stop trying, his willingness to continue even when progress felt invisible. It wasn't a glamorous decision. No one would celebrate it or even notice it. But deep down, he understood something important. The moment a person refuses to quit, the story isn't finished yet. And unfinished stories still have room to change. That realization gave him a strange kind of peace. He didn't need to solve his entire life overnight. He only needed to keep taking the next step. One effort today, another tomorrow, and then the next day again. Small movements forward, no matter how slow. If someone had asked him for advice at that moment, he might have said this: stop demanding immediate results from long journeys. Instead, focus on actions you can repeat every day. Show up again tomorrow, even if today felt messy. Consistency quietly builds strength most people underestimate. But even with that new decision, the road ahead remained uncertain. Changing a mindset is one thing. Learning how to sustain it is another challenge entirely. And soon, he would encounter something, or someone, that would reveal a truth he had been missing. A truth that would change the way he understood persistence forever. Many of the stories you hear here aren't just stories. They reflect the invisible weight you may be carrying every day. If you're tired of holding pain, responsibility, and guilt that were never yours, I created an ebook called The Weight of Stones That Are Not Yours and More Too bonus for you. It's for those who want to let go, set boundaries, and live with more lightness. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. A few days after that quiet decision, life continued much as it had before. The same responsibilities, the same pressure, the same uncertain road ahead. But something inside him had shifted just enough to make him more observant. He began paying attention to ideas, conversations, and small moments he once ignored, and one of those moments would soon leave a lasting mark. One evening, after a long day of work, he stopped by a small bookstore, not searching for anything in particular, just looking for a brief escape from his thoughts. He wandered through the narrow aisles, scanning titles without much expectation, until one worn book caught his attention, almost as if it had been waiting there for him. Its message was simple, but it carried a quiet power. The pages spoke about something many people misunderstand. Success, it said, rarely belongs to the most talented or the most fortunate. More often, it belongs to the ones who keep going longer than others are willing to. Those who survive the long seasons where progress feels invisible. Those who refuse to step away when the path becomes uncomfortable. The idea struck him harder than he expected. He began thinking about people he admired, people whose stories once seemed mysterious. Maybe their difference wasn't some rare gift or secret advantage. Maybe they simply stayed on the path while others quietly turned back, and that possibility changed the way he looked at his own story. Later that week, he spoke with an older man he knew from work, someone who had built a stable life after years of hardship. During their conversation, the older man shared something surprisingly honest. He said most people overestimate what can happen in a few months and underestimate what persistence can build over several years. The words lingered in the man's mind long after the conversation ended. It was such a simple idea, yet it felt like a missing piece of a puzzle. Perhaps persistence wasn't just stubbornness or blind effort. Perhaps it was a long-term strategy that quietly outlasted temporary obstacles. A strategy many people abandon too early. If you were listening closely, you could almost hear the lesson forming. Don't treat setbacks as signals to stop. Treat them as part of the timeline every meaningful goal requires. Adjust the plan, improve the approach, but keep moving forward. Momentum builds slowly, then suddenly. For the first time in years, he felt something different growing inside him. Not excitement exactly, but steady conviction. A quiet belief that maybe his past failures weren't final after all. Maybe they were simply unfinished chapters in a longer story. And now, he needed a new way to live that story. Because understanding persistence was only the beginning. The real challenge would be turning that understanding into daily action. Not occasionally, not when motivation appeared, but consistently. And that required something more practical than inspiration alone. It required a system. Understanding persistence was one thing. Living it every single day was something else entirely. The man knew inspiration fades quickly if it isn't supported by action. So instead of chasing motivation, he began building something more reliable. A simple system to guide how he moved forward. He started with a rule so basic it almost sounded too small to matter. No matter what happened, he would move forward every day. Not with giant leaps or heroic efforts, just consistent progress. A task completed, a skill practiced, a problem studied a little longer. Small actions that kept the wheels turning. At first, the steps were almost invisible. He read a few pages each morning before work, spent 30 minutes improving a skill that might open new doors, kept a notebook where he wrote down lessons from each failure. Instead of avoiding mistakes, he started studying them. Whenever something went wrong, he asked a different question. Not, why is this happening to me? But, what can this teach me for the next attempt? That small shift changed how setbacks felt. They became information rather than proof of defeat. Slowly, the chaos in his life began to organize itself. Not perfectly, of course. Life rarely works that way. But the daily rhythm of effort created a sense of direction. Instead of reacting to problems, he started responding with intention. And intention brings a quiet kind of power. If someone had watched him during those weeks, they might have noticed simple habits. Waking a little earlier to plan the day. Writing down one meaningful goal before starting work. Reviewing mistakes at night instead of burying them in frustration. Small rituals that quietly strengthened his discipline. He also stopped waiting for perfect conditions. Too many dreams disappear while people wait for the right moment. So he began acting with whatever resources he had right now. Imperfect tools, imperfect timing, imperfect knowledge. Progress rarely waits for perfection. Over time, the system became part of who he was. Not something he forced himself to follow, but something natural, like a steady rhythm guiding how he approached challenges. Every day added another small brick to the foundation he was building. And slowly, that foundation began to feel solid. But systems are always tested when life pushes back, and life has a way of testing new commitments quickly. Before long, obstacles returned. doubts, frustrations, unexpected problems. The kind of pressure that makes people question their new path, and the next few days would test his determination more than ever. At the beginning, the new system felt promising. Each small action gave him a quiet sense of control he hadn't felt in years. But as days passed, reality began testing his commitment. Old problems didn't disappear just because he had changed his mindset. If anything, they seemed to push harder than before. Some mornings, the doubts returned the moment he opened his eyes. The mind has a strange memory for past failures. It reminds you of every attempt that once ended badly. And on those mornings, getting up to continue felt heavier than expected. Persistence suddenly looked less heroic and more exhausting. Then came the unexpected obstacles. Plans that fell apart halfway through the day. Tasks that took twice as long as he imagined. Moments where it seemed like the world was quietly resisting his progress. The kind of days that test whether commitment is real or temporary. There were evenings when frustration sat heavily on his shoulders. He would review his efforts and wonder if any of it truly mattered. After all, visible results still hadn't appeared. Just like before, progress seemed painfully slow, and the temptation to quit whispered again. But this time, something was different. Instead of abandoning the path, he reminded himself of the new rule. Move forward today, no matter how small the step. Some days that step was learning something new. Other days it was simply refusing to stop. He began noticing an interesting pattern in difficult moments. Most obstacles felt overwhelming only in the beginning. Once he pushed through the first layer of resistance, things became manageable. The mind exaggerates difficulty before action begins. But action has a way of shrinking fear. So when doubts appeared, he leaned into small, immediate actions. Read 1 page instead of 10. Work 10 minutes instead of an hour. Solve one part of the problem instead of the entire challenge. Momentum, he discovered, loves modest beginnings. Little by little, those difficult days started shaping his resilience. Each time he pushed through hesitation, his confidence grew stronger. Not loud confidence, not arrogance, just quiet inner stability. The kind that forms when a person proves something to themselves. And that quiet strength was beginning to change him. Still, the outside world had not yet shown any clear reward. No breakthrough, no obvious success, no dramatic moment of recognition. Just effort, repeated day after day. Yet something subtle was happening beneath the surface. And soon, the results would begin to appear. At first, the changes were so small, they were almost impossible to notice. No dramatic success, no sudden transformation, just the quiet rhythm of daily effort repeating itself. But persistence has a strange power. When repeated long enough, it begins to reshape a person from the inside out. And slowly, that change started revealing itself. The man began handling problems differently than before. Situations that once overwhelmed him now felt manageable. Instead of reacting with frustration, he paused and looked for solutions. Experience from past failures had quietly become useful knowledge. What once felt like weakness was turning into wisdom. His skills improved little by little as well. Hours of practice that once seemed insignificant began to accumulate. Concepts that confused him months earlier now felt familiar. Tasks that once took an entire afternoon could now be completed in an hour. And that progress, though subtle, was real. More importantly, his mindset was evolving. Where doubt once dominated his thoughts, patience had begun to grow. He stopped expecting immediate rewards from his efforts. Instead, he trusted the process he had built day by day. Trust in the process created a new kind of calm. People around him slowly started noticing something different. Not necessarily success yet, but consistency. They saw a man who kept showing up no matter what happened the day before. Someone who didn't disappear after a setback anymore. That kind of reliability quietly earns respect. And something interesting happens when a person becomes consistent. Opportunities begin to appear in unexpected places. Sometimes through conversations, sometimes through trust built over time. People feel more confident opening doors for those who keep moving forward. Persistence makes others believe in you. Still, the road wasn't perfect. There were days when fatigue returned, moments when he questioned whether the progress was truly enough. But now he had proof that small efforts were adding up, and that proof made quitting harder than continuing. If someone had asked him what changed the most, he might have said this: success didn't suddenly arrive one morning. What arrived first was resilience, the ability to continue without immediate reward. And resilience is the soil where long-term success eventually grows. a lesson many people never stay long enough to learn. Then one day, something finally happened. A moment that looked small from the outside, but to him it felt like the first crack of sunlight after a long night. A sign that all those quiet days of persistence had been building something real, and that moment was just the beginning. One ordinary morning, something different finally happened. Not fireworks, not a dramatic celebration, just a small opportunity appearing where none existed before. It came through a conversation he almost didn't have. A simple moment that might have passed unnoticed months earlier, but this time, he was ready for it. Someone had noticed the way he worked, the consistency, the reliability, the quiet effort that rarely called attention to itself. They remembered the problems he solved and the commitment he showed day after day. So when an opportunity appeared, his name came to mind first. Not because of luck, but because of persistence. The chance itself wasn't enormous. It didn't instantly change his life overnight, but it was different from the doors that had closed before. This time, the opportunity aligned with the skills he had patiently developed. All those invisible hours were finally beginning to matter. When he stepped into that moment, something surprising happened. Tasks that once felt intimidating now felt manageable. The knowledge he had built slowly now guided his decisions. Even his confidence felt steadier than before. The long preparation had quietly shaped him for this moment, and that's the strange thing about persistence. From the outside, success often looks sudden. People see the breakthrough but rarely notice the years behind it. The late nights, the repeated attempts, the countless small improvements, the hidden foundation beneath visible progress. As he moved through this new opportunity, he began seeing the pattern clearly. Every small step from the past had prepared him for this stage. Even the failures had taught him lessons he now used daily. What once looked like wasted effort now revealed its true purpose. Nothing had been meaningless after all. If someone had asked him for advice right then, he might have said, "Don't chase the moment of success. Chase the daily actions that quietly prepare you for it." Because when the opportunity arrives, preparation decides everything. Persistence builds that preparation. Soon, the small opportunity grew into something larger. Not instantly, but steadily. One success opened the door to another possibility. Confidence strengthened, and new paths appeared ahead of him. The life that once felt impossible was slowly becoming real. And yet, the most remarkable transformation wasn't external. Yes, opportunities were growing, and progress was finally visible. But the greatest change had happened within the man himself. The man who once doubted his strength to continue had become someone entirely different. Years later, if someone had looked at his life from the outside, they might have assumed he had always been successful. The stability, the confidence, the steady progress, it all seemed natural now. But the truth was written in the quiet years no one had seen. Years filled with slow effort, repeated failures, and stubborn persistence. The kind of years that quietly shape a person's destiny. The man himself often reflected on that journey. He remembered the nights when quitting felt like the only reasonable choice. The mornings when doubt was louder than hope. The moments when progress seemed invisible despite all his effort. And those memories reminded him how easily the story could have ended differently. Because success didn't come from a single brilliant decision. It came from thousands of small ones. Choosing to try again after disappointment. Choosing to learn instead of blaming circumstances. Choosing to move forward even when motivation was nowhere to be found. Over time, those choices built a new life around him. Opportunities expanded, financial pressure slowly disappeared, and his confidence grew stronger. But perhaps the most valuable reward wasn't material success. It was the deep understanding he had gained about perseverance, a wisdom forged through experience rather than theory. People sometimes asked him how he managed to turn things around. They expected a secret strategy or some rare advantage, but his answer was always surprisingly simple. He just stayed in the game longer than he once believed possible, and that made all the difference. He often told others something important. Persistence doesn't guarantee immediate success, but quitting guarantees that success will never arrive. The path of perseverance may feel slow and uncertain, yet it's the only path where transformation can actually happen. If someone had met him during his early struggles, they might never have predicted this future. Back then, he looked like just another man facing ordinary problems. But persistence quietly reshapes ordinary lives into extraordinary stories. One day, one effort, one decision at a time. That's how real change unfolds. And perhaps the most powerful part of his journey was this. He wasn't born with unusual strength or talent. He simply refused to stop walking the road. A decision any person could choose, starting today. A decision that begins with something small and grows into something life-changing. But his story carries a deeper lesson that goes beyond one man. A lesson that applies to anyone watching and wondering about their own path. Because persistence isn't just a trait some people have. It's a choice people make again and again. And that choice leads directly to the final truth of this story. By now, the story may feel familiar in a quiet way. Not because everyone lives the same life as that man, but because almost everyone has faced moments when giving up felt easier than continuing. Moments when effort seemed invisible and progress felt painfully slow. Moments when doubt tried to convince them the journey wasn't worth it. What his story reveals is something many people misunderstand about persistence. It isn't loud, dramatic, or heroic most of the time. More often, it's quiet and almost invisible. It looks like waking up and trying again after yesterday didn't go well. It looks like continuing when motivation has already disappeared. Persistence also doesn't mean pretending things are easy. The road will still contain frustration, uncertainty, and setbacks. But instead of treating those moments as signals to stop, they become part of the process. Each obstacle becomes a lesson rather than a final verdict, and that mindset changes everything. If you look closely at your own life, you might notice similar patterns. Goals you once started with excitement, plans that slowed down when the results didn't appear fast enough, dreams that quietly faded because the road became uncomfortable. Persistence invites you to approach those moments differently. For example, when progress feels slow, try shrinking the goal instead of abandoning it. Read 5 pages instead of finishing an entire book. Practice a skill for 10 minutes instead of waiting for a free afternoon. Solve one part of a problem rather than the entire challenge. Small steps keep the journey alive. Another powerful habit is learning from each attempt. Instead of asking, "Why did this fail?" ask, "What can I improve next time?" That shift turns mistakes into valuable teachers, and every lesson strengthens your next effort. Over time, something remarkable begins to happen. The person who continues learns more, adapts faster, and grows stronger. Meanwhile, many others quietly step away from the road, not because they lack ability, but because the journey required more patience than expected. Persistence becomes the quiet advantage. So when the road in your life feels long or uncertain, remember this story. The difference between struggle and transformation often lies in one simple decision. Not the decision to succeed immediately, but the decision to continue walking when stopping would feel easier. And that decision can begin today. But before you decide what this lesson means for your own life, there's one more piece to this story worth hearing. A way to see the entire journey from a new perspective. Because sometimes a single idea can change how we understand everything that came before. And that idea might be exactly what someone needs to hear today.